Hello. This is part 2 of 3 of my Odyssey series. The first part is backstory and history, so if you are interested in that, go watch the first video. And if you're only here for Nolan Odyssey stuff, go watch the third video. That's where it is. I appreciate you clicking onto a different video if you came from the first one. And if you're just interested in your Odyssey of choice, welcome. Stick around at least one segment extra, please. Every time you see an Odyssey, there's something weird and different. Early film, 1905 and 1911. So our first film adaptation is more a proof of concept than an actual story. Odysseus is asleep in front of a cave, and a bunch of nymphs come out to sing and dance and play music. Then Calypso, probably, goes to wake him, lures him to the mouth of the cave. Then she vanishes, where the Cyclops tries to snatch him and eat him. He escapes, thinks better of it, and then grabs the spirit of blind Polyphemus. Once he's gone, Calypso comes back and goes, "Wait, please stay." And he's like, "Nah, man, you tried to get me eaten. Bye." And that all takes like 6 minutes. So not a lot to work with here, although we do get to see that this Odysseus revels in the violence that he causes, and he definitely didn't need to go back and blind the Cyclops. He was free and clear to leave after he puts his hand through this mouth of the cave, and then after that is like, I need to get some revenge. So it's kind of Looney Tunes in the fact that you're supposed to laugh at the pain of Polyphemus with Odysseus. The next adaptation only comes out 6 years later, and we're firmly in silent film territory now, where what's explaining the action is just a slideshow between different shots of big, ostentatious sets and people in beautiful costumes and people only doing a handful of actions before the next scene continues on. And we get a very similar structure to some of the other kids' adaptations we've seen. We get Scylla and Charybdis, we get the Cyclops, we get the Bulls of Zeus, because we don't really need to get too into it in the silent movie. And most of the tone is conveyed through color. The thing I want to harp on, though, is that this Odysseus is very self-inserty in that he's kind of there and things are happening around him, at least according to the slides. But at least twice, he's directly looking into the camera and making this gesture, kind of like a, can you believe what's going on here? But not as exaggerated. So this one specifically is already starting the line of protagonist equals self-insert equals you are going to relate to what this guy is doing because he is supposed to embody what you would do in this situation. And currently, what is expected to do in this situation is just to go, wow, can you believe what's going on over there? I'm glad I'm me over here. Oh neat, there's a history section. Oh God. Oh no. Oh boy. I gotta get more to work. The Odyssey, a modern sequel by Nikos Kazantzakis and translated by Kimon Frere. This is dense. I'm in trouble with this one. This is the first of many that are going to be too smart for me. When the intro, written by the translator, goes, yeah, well, he was doing this in his life. He was working on this, and this philosophy. And then he was working with this philosopher. And then he spent some time in the mountains doing this, and this. And he won awards for this. And he was working through his philosophy and takes on this one. And I knew I was in trouble. On top of the fact that this is over 10,000 lines of dialogue. There's 66666. 24 books. All of it in very dense symbolism and research and prose and artistic interpretation. So I'm going to try my best. But this is the kind of stuff that like entire doctoral theses are made of. Like, this is an auteur. This guy won awards for his writing. But also, like, this is an example of, if you write good enough, you can literally win awards for like anything. I'm going to try to keep this summary short, but it is 800 pages. And like it said up top, it is a sequel. So all the events are new. And it's a lot. It's a lot. We start off with where the Odyssey ends. Kind of. This book is opening with, he outwitted and outmaneuvered a potential coup, so everything is fine, except Odysseus comes back to an island that is mostly not in need of him. He has nothing to do because his wife is good at running it, and Telemachus is a up-and-coming king. So pretty quickly, he decides that he's gonna go off and find another crew and start a new journey. So the first stop is Sparta, where Odysseus immediately notices that there's a large and looming barbarian threat on their doors, and Menelaus is just not in shape to deal with it. This may be a modern, like, interpretation of the Sea People, which are something we don't know a whole lot about, but we do know that somebody called the Sea Peoples started raiding and pillaging around the Mediterranean and was kind of a cause, but not really. It was kind of like a domino in the large domino chain that was the Bronze Age collapse. So they contributed to the Bronze Age collapse, but we have no idea where they came from, and honestly, we have no idea where they went after they were done doing what they were doing. So calling them barbarians from the north is just as right as saying they're anything else. Anyways, Odysseus abducts Helen, and then they're off. Next stop is Crete, where Odysseus is disgusted by the decadence of these stagnant kings and these strange pagan practices. The people lead a revolt against this king, and Odysseus goes, "Yeah, down with the man! Aren't you the man? You have no way to know that. Go get him!" All the while, Odysseus is going, "I can't help but think there's this one true God I should be worshiping, but I need to figure out what it is so I can worship it properly. I just don't know." At first, he seems to think it's a god of iron, although I don't know if that's supposed to be a metaphor or not. Then he seems to think it's a god of hunger and strife, and then he sort of settles on god of vengeance for a while, and I don't know if that's supposed to be a metaphor. They prance off from the rebellion, sans Helen because she's found yet another husband, and the rest of the crew go off to Egypt. They work their way up the Nile, looting and pillaging an already impoverished Egypt, which may be another allusion to the Bronze Age collapse. But they basically do the same thing they did in Crete, which is overthrow the government. And once the pharaoh is gone, Odysseus convinces a whole bunch of people to follow this god of vengeance till they reach the base of the Nile, where he's been told he needs to build a city. Whew. Along the way, they have a bunch of colonialist-flavored encounters with the indigenous African tribes, where, for instance, a Greek man in the crew walks to a African tribe alone, and the African tribe goes, "Ah, you'll be our new chief now," as one does. As is often the case in these types of stories, it seems. So they do find the base of the Nile, which is this giant lake which has a mountain next to it, and Odysseus goes, "All right, guys, start setting up. I'm going to go talk to God on this mountain." And so he goes up the mountain and has basically a Moses on the mountaintop experience, it seems, where he kind of condenses and coalesces a bunch of different religious themes and motifs and practices into this sort of ascetic type of philosophy. At least that's what the translator calls it. it doesn't seem quite right to me, so that just means I'm missing something big. Fryer, in the chapter summary, says this is where the author coalesces his ascetic philosophy. Asceticism is the general idea that you give up earthly pleasures to attain a higher understanding, and this happens in a bunch of different religions, so it looks different culture to culture. But honestly, this doesn't feel like what Odysseus is doing. Sure, he experiences ego death on that mountain in a we're all sort of one consciousness on this great Mother Gaia type way. But the things that this Odysseus loves is thinking and finding answers and philosophizing, which is what he is still doing. He also loves telling people what to do and how the best way to live their life is, which he continues to do until he dies at the end of this book, spoiler alert. So either I don't understand this philosophy, or me and the author have very different views on what earthly pleasures are. And you know what? It's probably me not understanding the philosophy. I am 90% sure that is what's happening, that I just don't understand asceticism. I'm probably not even pronouncing it right. So anyways, after what seems to be a proto-communist utopia is formed, the town is destroyed by lava, and everyone who's still alive leaves him. After a while, he's living as a hermit and has another trippy, very complicated vision where I think he kills the idea of an anthropomorphized god and now thinks death is the one constant in life. Although he still goes on about how man creates God and kills God, and God is the only as powerful as man, but man is connected through everything and is the universe, but only through deeds and actions can we create the universe and thus God. But past and future are the same, so everything is God, and everything is just expanding into a wide milieu of godliness and manliness, and everything is one. Anyways, he has a bunch of trippy visions. People ask him for advice. He takes a boat down to the South Pole and dies. And you may say, Link, that wasn't short at all. And I say, this is 800 fucking pages long. It's short, and anybody who's read this knows I did this an entire disservice. Listing out the events of this book is not what this book is about. This is a fool's errand that I have greatly underestimated. This is probably the worst analysis I'm going to be doing, because there's just so much. There's so much in here, and it would take literally like whole classes to contextualize this book. There's so much religious connotations, there's so much historical connotations, so much philosophy going on that I'd have to do a full dissertation if I were to fully cover this. But in terms of this Odysseus, who is this Odysseus? This Odysseus is the pinnacle. Yes, we're already getting to pinnacles. This is the pinnacle of the wanderer Odysseus. He is not content to simply be one thing. He needs to constantly try to find new and interesting ways to contextualize the world. He is not content to just be one thing, be one place, be one person. He needs to be everything. And he finds his way into the idea that he is connected to everything and all is one, and death follows him like a constant companion. And all that philosophy-wise is good, but I can't help but note that when pulling from all of these different religions and philosophies, it kind of gives I, as a outside man coming into all of these different philosophies. So thusly, my interpretation is the right interpretation. And everyone else in the context of this universe goes, yeah, you're right. You're smart. You're the most enlightened person we've ever met. We come seeking your wisdom after a certain point. And it never seems like it lands on one answer to the question of like, well, what's the point of it all? Because there is no point at all. But Odysseus, instead of just going, there's no answer, he just keeps coming up with new and different answers. And it seems like every time he interacts with a different person, and these persons don't feel like actual full people. They feel more like mouthpieces to whatever philosophy Odysseus needs to contradict at that time. So whenever he interacts with a person, he's more so having a philosophical debate, not even with the other person sometimes, more like it's a philosophical debate within himself. And he views himself on a path of enlightenment that is constantly being tempted by different things. It's never one thing. So this Odysseus wanders for the sake of wandering because he believes that maybe knowledge of the world makes him one with the world, and also how to figure out what God is, or maybe kill God, or maybe take God out for a drink. What Odysseus seems to want to do with God changes from moment to moment. And I don't know if that's because I don't understand half of this book, or if the point of this book is to go through the journey of finding the final answer in death. I think it's probably the former, that I do not understand this book. But I don't need to fully understand this book to understand that this Odysseus is the pinnacle of the wanderer, the one who is constantly seeking different forms of freedom, and when he can't get full freedom, he finds a different way to be free. That's what's here. That is a smidgen of what is here. This Odysseus values wandering and freedom. All right, our first feature film, Ulysses, in 1954, directed by Mario Camerini, with Kirk Douglas as our Odysseus. This is the one my dad watched. We enter in on our rare in media res, where Penelope and Telemachus are having their in-canon problems. The poet that Penelope was going to yell at gives us some backstory on what's going on with Odysseus. He seems to have started his problems with invading a Trojan god, Neptune's temple, and his priestess, Cassandra, cursing Odysseus, which is very interesting. Meanwhile, we have Odysseus washed up on the Phaeacian shore. Nausicaa rescues him, but he has amnesia. Weird. While they have the wrestling matches to honor him, he doesn't know who he is, but he still participates in the wrestling matches, where we get glimpses of his personality. He's brave, he's strong, he's quick on his feet, he's courteous, good with wood, and then Nausicaa is instantly set to marry him, which, oh girl, no. No, that's not what they mean by cake topper. So Odysseus is set to marry Nausicaa, who is not a 12-year-old girl in this one, so thank God. But right before the wedding, he starts to remember everything, so he runs off, stares off into the middle distance on a beach, and remembers everything linearly, thankfully. So we fade in on a ship in the middle of a storm, where Neptune is wreaking havoc on Odysseus' crew. Some of Odysseus' crew are trying to make a sacrifice to Neptune, which he starts yelling at them for. He's like, Neptune doesn't exist, stop that. And at first I thought, does that mean that are they trying to make an Odysseus a Christian? Which is not new, we've seen it before. But no, later on in this movie, he goes, my one true God, Athena will help me. So it just seems monotheistic, but then I remember that Neptune in this one is specifically labeled a Trojan god, so I don't think it's so much that Odysseus is monotheistic for Athena in this one. I think he's just being, dismissive of a different culture's gods. When we get to Polyphemus' cave, we linger a long time on the crew making Polyphemus the wine that knocks him out, not bringing it to him, which is weird when you think about it in this context, because how the fuck is it getting fermented when they're just squishing it with their little feet right here, right now? Not important. They have the grapes on the island and they make the wine. And it's lingered on that Polyphemus has never had wine before because they never thought to turn the grapes into wine, which kind of carries over a theme from the original text, just in a different permutation. In the original, Odysseus makes a very long point to say that the Cyclopses were uncivilized brutes. They didn't have, like, the civilization to build boats or till the land according to a proper Greek society. So it's okay that he hurt them. They didn't know what Xenia was, so he wasn't obligated to give Xenia to them. So in this one, it's just a different xenophobia boner, focused specifically on the wine. We skip from Polyphemus directly to the Sirens, who tempt Odysseus with knowledge of his home, with the voice of his wife, even though we've already had him give a speech where he says he's often homesick for adventure. So the Sirens seem to have a more magical enticement than an actual, like, here's a strong moral argument for why you should come dash yourself on the rocks for us. So the next stop is Circe, who is played by the same actress as Penelope. A unique feature to this film. She's given a mermaid theme for this one, and they instantly make out. 6 months magically pass, and the crew are like, hey, we'd like to go home now. And he's like, well, we just got here. And they're like, nah, man, it's been 6 months. You are bewitched. And he goes, no, I still want to stay. And they're like, okay, well, then we're going to leave without you. And then they instantly shipwreck off the coast. So they have a lover's quarrel about it, and Circe summons the dead, both of the crew and of the Greek armies, to shame Odysseus into accepting immortality. And it almost works, except Odie's mom makes an appearance, and she goes, hey, no, you gotta go home, your wife needs you. And, it's hard to say no to your ghost mom. We've only got 20 minutes left of this movie, so we cut directly to him and Penelope having their clandestine night meeting. He gives her the idea for the bow contest, which I hate when that happens. It gives Odysseus even more agency at the expense of Penelope. He leaves that conversation and does a spill his guts out to Argus. What was that? I've never mentioned Argus before. Whoops. So I've never watched Futurama, but I do know of the scene where Fry's dog, after he, cryogenically freezes for 1,000 years, waits on the doorstep for Fry to come back and then dies. This is the original version of that. Argus is a hunting dog that Odysseus raised right before he left for Troy. And this dog has been sitting in the same place for 20 years waiting for him to get back. And as soon as Odysseus is in, range of him, Argus is like, oh my god, and then dies. It's honestly my favorite part of the Odyssey. It's more heartbreaking because oftentimes in the original, Odysseus knows that if he goes to comfort Argus in his last moments, he will be found out. And oftentimes this is the fact in adaptations. He goes to Argus and goes, good boy, and then Eumaeus is like, oh, you're Odysseus, aren't you? So in the original, Argus dies only knowing that Odysseus is back, and Odysseus has got to keep a blank face the entire time. It's some good shit. It's some good dramatic shit. And so he dies, but Odysseus spills his guts, and Telemachus overhears that. And so they continue on as planned. The bow contest happens, the killing of the suitors happens, the madly falling in love with Odysseus happens, and they cut off at the happily ever after bit. So we have a bit of condensing of the plot here, which is going to be a common theme in the movies coming up. Odysseus's one problem is a major inciting factor when he and his crew raid the temple of Neptune, and the curse is put on him by Cassandra. And thusly, all of their troubles along the entire Odyssey are the result of that curse. Polyphemus is no longer the instigator, he is a symptom, which I find interesting in the turn of agency. This also makes Circe's mermaid theme make much more sense when she is tied to Neptune specifically. In the previous section, we saw the clash between Wanderer Odysseus and King of Ithaca Odysseus clash it out. In this one, King of Ithaca Odysseus wins out. When he's being domestic with Circe, he realizes this is what he wants. Even though he's got a little bit of wanderlust in him, he wants to have this calm, cheerful life, but not at the expense of his family and crew. When his mom tells him, hey, you're needed at home, your wife and son need you, he goes, oh, well, I can have all this back at home. I'm a king. I don't need to have the guilt and shame of being left behind by my crew. I can go home to my wife and kid, which is a far more socially acceptable version of what he was currently experiencing, especially with denying the immortality bit. Now he doesn't have to remember that he will abandon his crew and his island and his kingdom. Now he gets all the things he had with Circe, especially because Circe is the spitting image of his wife. He gets to have everything he was having on this island with his wife and not have to feel a shred of guilt about it. The Golden Apple by Jean Latouche and Jerome Morose in 1954. A musical adaptation that takes the names of the places from the Iliad and the Odyssey and places them smack dab in the middle of rural Washington state in 1900. Probably because it's got Mount Olympus there and Olympia, which is the capital. It started off Broadway, but then moved on to Broadway for a little bit, and then off Broadway again, and then did a circuit for a couple times. The version I watched online was in 1995, so it's been on and off again for quite a while. It seems to be the only musical that started off Broadway to win the New York Drama Critics Circle Awards for Best Musical. I hope that's a big one. I don't know. I will be frank once again. I am not very much into musicals. I know that sounds very foreboding, knowing what's further down, but trust me, it'll be fine. It just means that I'm not very well versed in the jargon, in the lingo. We open on Helen bemoaning small-town life the day the men of Apple Roost return from the Spanish-American War. Odysseus leads the battalion back home, and celebrations ensue. The boys, as they're credited in the transcripts, includes Agamemnon, Ajax, Achilles, Patroclus, etc. They sing a song about how willing Helen is to be with all of them, find out she got married while they were gone, almost kill Menelaus, and then Odysseus has to make them all swear that they won't kill Menelaus and respect the marriage and prevent any harm from coming to Helen or Menelaus. Paris flies in on a hot air balloon from the city, where he's roped into being the judge for a baking contest, which Mrs. Mars wins, where she instantly introduces him to Helen, and then they have a montage and he flies off to the city. This is the end of Act 1. Now, this is obviously the end of the Iliad in our Iliad Odyssey combo, but honestly, none of the events I described are relevant to the Iliad proper. A lot of the things that we know about the Trojan War don't come from the Iliad and the Odyssey. They come from myths and kind of explanations that were put into effect after the Iliad and the Odyssey had been entrenched as, like, history. Like, they're like, okay, so if Menelaus and Helen are married, why does everyone go after her? And so they invented that Odysseus made everyone that was wooing Helen swear an oath to defend the marriage so that war wouldn't break out. The Iliad is really Achilles' story and only takes place like really far into the actual war. There's a lot of stuff that's supposed to have come beforehand and a lot of stuff that like was invented after the fact, after the Iliad and the Odyssey were created. They were kind of like explanations on why some of these things don't make too much sense. So they tried to like logic their way into making a coherent story out of just the Iliad and just the Odyssey. And then they had like extra bits packed on to that. So Act 2 opens on Helen clearly not wanting to go anywhere. So Odysseus brings up his Trojan horse plan. In this case, it is him going up to a bunch of people, making them form a committee, don't ask questions, and then tells them, hey, get Helen out of town. And then gets another group of people to form a different committee and tells that committee, hey, that first committee over there is the reason that all of the things in this town are bad. And so then the committees start fighting. This causes so much trouble that the mayor, Hector Charybdis, calls for a duel to happen between Menelaus and Paris so they can just duke it out and be done with it. Menelaus gets Odysseus to fight for him and kicks Paris' ass. And then Helen goes home without a fuss after that. Hector, mad at the boys for causing damage to his city, sings a gay little tune about how the city will get revenge on them because it's full of sin and these country bumpkins won't be able to fight against it. What follows is all of the people from the Odyssey are now temptations of the city. Calypso is an oil baron's widow who throws an extravagant party for them, but at the end kind of rejects them because they're either too boring or the trend of liking them has passed, so they get left behind and they're wallowing in pity. Hector and Mr. Scylla, remember his last name is Charybdis in this one, convince the boys to invest in the stock market, making the stock of hemp tank, losing them all their money, which causes Ajax to fling himself out a window, which is lingered on for maybe 2 seconds before they move on. The true tragedy of the city. Apathy. The Sirens seem to be exoticized indigenous women of a desert island. No, those don't exist in Washington. And Hector strands them on there for a while. And finally, Circe is a burlesque dancer who promises to make people smart and successful, but they have to give her their hearts. Hector convinces Paris to kill Achilles so that Circe will love him. He stabs Achilles on stage, and then Odysseus basically goes, well, enough of this. It's time to go home. That all took 10 years somehow. Odysseus gets back home, tells Penelope he's got all that pesky travel out of the system. They kiss, and all is forgiven. Now, while this Odysseus is the instigator of a lot of the plot, he's a putz, for the most part. He's the one who makes the boys pledge to honor Helen's marriage, but when they rightfully go, nah, man, she clearly went willingly, we're not going to go after her, he goes, no, we must do this, for the principle of the thing. When the dust settles from the duel, Odysseus tries to give Hector the same spiel, but Hector goes, okay, but which principle though? And they're like, The important thing isn't the principle, the important thing is we want it. Which I can't help but think isn't too clever, but I don't think this Odysseus is supposed to be clever. In fact, I think this similar line is probably supposed to mirror something that was told to these soldiers when they were fighting the Spanish-American War. It doesn't matter why you're fighting, it just matters that you win. But the main takeaway is city bad, pastoral living good, and it is not subtle. The temptations of the city are fast fashion, rip-roaring parties, gambling on the stock market, gay mayors, hot, loose women, jealous boyfriends, plaid. Now, about halfway through this play, something clicked inside my head. What major changes to the urbanization environment were happening around the time this music was written? If you said white flight and the rise of suburbia, you get a cookie. White flight is the idea that white people in the United States, when confronted with integration with other ethnicities, moved out of the cityscapes and into the newly created suburbs, where oftentimes HOAs controlled who lived in the neighborhoods, regardless of what GI loan you had. Upon making sure that I had all my ducks in a row in the timeline-wise, I found that there's a growing movement to reject this tagline for this cultural shift. Flight gives the impression that white people hiked up their skirts and fled from the idea of equality. But we know it was not a peaceful wave. White people defended their way of oppression with extreme violence, both intra and extrajudicial. Brown versus the Board of Education came down the same year this musical did. and the mainstream civil rights movement was just getting started. It was gonna be tough from there. It's still tough from here. Not only is the city filled with sin and depravity, a lot of these temptations are exoticized, particularly the women, even though the entire cast is white. One of these temptations is simply science. I don't think this correlates with any specific Odyssey stop. If this was a smarter Odysseus, I would say that this would be his siren's call, but no. His siren's call was... Ugh. I'm not saying because the song is technically bad, but the idea that making random syllables sound like an exotic language is tacky. You could have just put a foreign language in there. Instead, you made it sound like random syllables because that's how foreign languages just sound to people. You could have made it pretty. Instead, you have gooning in 1954. That's going to turn on you totally in 2026 from what I hear. From what I hear from the children. A Scientist Woman has a whole song about all the modern day apocalypses that people are afraid of in 54. Now, remember, this is taking place in 1900. So, the earth is boiling, the soil is eroding, asteroids could hit us at any moment, etc. She doesn't have any solutions for these problems, but she does have a rocket, and if that rocket gets out of the atmosphere, it will take you to a different solar system. Now, she's portrayed as a bumbling fool the entire time, but I think it's really on the nose when you have an entire segment that isn't portrayed in the Odyssey, where you go, if you're having too many problems with your city, just leave. Who is this Odysseus? This is honest country boy Odysseus, with adventure in his heart, but he still loves his wife. See, they sing about it 3 different times in this musical. About the mundane parts of love, the greeting each other at the doorway, the making love under the starlight, the learning of each other's maiden names. I don't know.
Paying bills.
Paying bills. Paying bills. Arguing about the AC temp. But he needs to see the horrors of the city. And when they've run him ragged, he gets to scurry on back to his wife that's done nothing but wait patiently for him for 10 years. Sure, she yells at him a little, but that's just what women do. And after they kiss, it's all fine. Before he fades off into the sunset, he does get his own solo, in which he is just asking some very deep questions like, what's the point of it all? And then he looks really sad about it for a while. Then he gives himself an aw shucks kind of grin and gives himself a total non-answer.
I'm his life's answer, death's is the same. Love, hate, hope, and dreams, all the things you can name. All answer themselves together, not apart.
This song tries to give Odysseus some retroactive justification for his actions for the rest of the musical, in that he's trying to find himself, which is never mentioned anywhere else. But if it only took this fortune cookie bullshit to get him back home, maybe it shouldn't have taken him 10 years to do it. Ulysses versus the son of Hercules in 1962 by Mario Chiano. This is just Hercules, guys. From what I understand, there was a really popular Hercules movie that was inspired by the 1954 Ulysses that we already covered. So, in a way, we have this to thank for the sword and sandal genre that became popular around this time. So there are a bunch of follow-up Hercules movies, and they're not all played by the same actor. So a US production company took like 13 unrelated Hercules movies, and some of them aren't even Hercules. Some of them are like a local Italian hero that we don't know about. All of them just became the Sons of Hercules. And you'll never guess what this one is called. Heracles. This son of Hercules is called Heracles. I'm just gonna call him Hercules, guys. There's definitely some cuts made from the Italian version to the American version. I couldn't find an Italian version with like accurate English captions, so I watched the English dub and kind of watched the Italian dub to get clips and stuff, because for some reason the Italian dub had way better quality than the official release that I found online. So Odysseus is just inside of Ithaca when a Phoenician ship rams into the side and he is kidnapped by pirates who are working for Hercules. Hercules has been ordered by the gods to take Odysseus back to Polyphemus so he can be enslaved by Polyphemus. But his heart's just not in it right now because he's having his own girl problems at home. So he's like, oh, darn, all beans. In the meantime, Odysseus sets the ship on fire and sneaks off. So Hercules seems to be having trouble catching up to Odysseus up until he's not. And then they are both captured by these local half-bird looking people who all look like this, except for their queen, who's a sexy white lady. Sexy white lady goes, we need to sacrifice you to our local vulture god. And they go, well, how about instead, if you let us live, we'll teach you about civilization, how to build tools and homes and do agriculture and stuff. And sexy white lady's like, no thanks, and leaves. Odysseus and Hercules bemoan their situation and talk about their true loves, and then sexy bird lady comes back and they riz her to the max, so much so that she goes, well, I guess one of you can live and be my husband, but one of you still has to be sacrificed, so I can't decide. Both of you are going to have to fight each other, and whoever dies gets sacrificed and whoever lives gets to be my husband. And they go, sure, we'll do that. They promptly escape, and once they're in the clear, Hercules handcuffs himself to Odysseus, and they make for the next town, which turns out to be the town where Hercules' lady love lives, Helen. You can only have one blonde ancient Greek lady at a time. So Odysseus finds Lotus on the way over, drugs Hercules, and escapes. And when Hercules wakes up, he's like, oh man, sees that Odysseus has been captured by yet another local tribe of cavemen, and he goes, nope, I'm going to go see Helen. So Odysseus is kind of kidnapped by these cavemen people who have a king who doesn't look anything like them either, and the king doesn't believe he's Odysseus, so he asks him a bunch of riddles, which are pretty fun.
Dioses han creado a los mortales para que puedan hablar bien de ellos. ¿Y por qué los hombres han inventado los dioses? Para darse el gusto de blasfemar.
Yeah, that one's good. That's a good one. He also asks him to prove his archery skills by shooting the eye out of a captive woman. And Odysseus, being smart enough to know that the cruelty is the point, goes, no. That's too easy. How about I shoot the clasp that's holding her toga up off of her instead so she gets naked? The caveman king wants Odysseus to build him wings a la Icarus style, and when that goes awry, he is placed in a cell while the caveman king goes to invade the lands that Helen lives in. Hercules takes an army and defeats that caveman king and kills him, and then runs off to go rescue Odysseus. Odysseus' cell is collapsing Indiana Jones style, and Hercules gets there just in the nick of time to pull him out from being crushed. But the brush with death has made Odysseus mad, or so they think. Hercules is still trying to take him to Polyphemus, though, after all the things he's done. So there was an evil prince that was going to marry Helen at the beginning of the film that comes back now and sneaks into their camp and makes off with Helen. while Odysseus is actively escaping. Odysseus sees them as he's leaving and could leave and goes, nah, I'm going to rescue the damsel in distress, and has an epic fight scene where he kills the evil prince. And Hercules sees and now finally goes, all right, I'll petition the gods to set you free. Finally. The end. So this seems to be your typical versus movie, a la Alien versus Predator and Freddy versus Jason. I haven't seen either of those movies, but I've heard throughout my life that they are bad. They both have contrived plots, bad acting, clunky dialogue, bad costuming, and honestly, very little of the verses of the titled characters. There's not a lot of fighting between Odysseus and Hercules, but that's because this is also a swords and sandals movie, which demands that the good, awesome, amazing heroes fight the ugly, gross, uncivilized bad guys, because we are all comrades in the fight against barbarism, first and foremost, and everything else can fall by the wayside until the barbarians are defeated. The barbarians led by very conventionally attractive white people. But surprisingly, a really well-sourced Odysseus. The most of the time that he spends fighting is fighting against a rock that's trying to crush him. He uses avoidance tactics and his words and charm to get out of the situations. He doesn't fight Hercules straight on, ever, and spends most of his time coming up with schemes that he can sneak off and escape to. It's a very well-structured Odysseus. Even if I don't like the movie that he's set in, because of principle, honestly, I don't like all these sexy women being worshipped by dehumanized barbarian people. It's not to my taste. But this Odysseus is calm, charming, respectful, good at lying, doesn't do a whole lot of fighting, and when he does, he is good at it. And he's charismatic. It might have to do with the fact that his actor is like a famed and very competent French actor, and the Hercules that he's acting next to is like an American wrestler. So like, it's easy to stand out in this movie when you are even remotely competent. He did a very good job. I enjoyed this performance. And I enjoyed that this is a characterization of Odysseus that holds true even when none of the other stuff is historically accurate. I'm the son of Hercules. Heracles. So is this Odysseus the Charmer? I think this is Odysseus the Charmer. Oh, I wish I could save that for a better film. But he's the charmer. He likes to charm people, and he gets away with it. His charm and goodness is what gets him out in the end. L'Odyssée, directed by Franco Rossi, starring Bikin Femiu as our Odysseus. And this one is touted as one of the most accurate Odysseys put to film, and they're right. So this one is very, very accurate. It is one of our few in media res that we have beforehand. I know the last film had in media res, but that's it. There's no more. There's no more in media res. So this version has pretty much the same line of events that happens in the Odyssey itself, so I'm not going to go over anything specific so far. Just know that Telemachus is in this slutty outfit the entire time. So remember,
The prophecy!
that is only barely an exaggeration on how it's presented in the Odyssey itself. The Odyssey has no sense of dramatic tension. Something is introduced the instant it's needed. Alcinous only remembers that this prophecy exists after it's already happened, which is always so convenient for prophecies, right? In this version, though, the prophecy is an ever-present cloud. It hangs over Odysseus as soon as he meets with the Phaeacians. Athena tells him that these people are more guarded and they're less trusting, and so he is putting on this act the entire time. Here the Phaeacians are very critical of him. King Alcinous takes the prophecy of Poseidon bringing them doom very seriously. They even have a boat half finished outside of their palace to remind them that this will all go away eventually. And while the Phaeacians are kind to him when he lands, as soon as they find out he's Odysseus, he is no longer telling his story to a rapt audience. He is testifying in front of a council of elders, trying to justify why they should help him get home, risking the wrath of the gods and the destruction of their island. And they are not easy on him. They keep questioning his motivations every step of the way. Queen Arete even asks at one point, "Hey, do you even want to go home?" Even with the idea that he needs to make his point way more convincing, Odysseus is more reserved and gives a kind of cards on the table type presentation, even when they have to drag it out of him over multiple days. He's got this air of, "I know this looks bad, but here's what I got." At one point, Alcinous just asks him to stay, completing Xenia in a way that doesn't make him choose between helping Odysseus and facing the wrath of the gods. Odysseus says no because he has been told that his returning to Ithaca is something the gods want. And that makes it really hard for Alcinous too. Odysseus was told that he had to leave Calypso's island and return to Ithaca as ordered by the gods, and he has to do that. It doesn't matter what he wants. It's what the gods want. Something that is emphasized in this version is that Odysseus keeps telling his audience that he did not want to force his crew to do anything. He put things to a vote. He told people they didn't have to come if they didn't want to. They still did, and they still lost their lives, but he emphasizes he was not forcing anybody to do anything. Do you think that might be subliminal messaging? Despite this, his crew seemed very distrustful of him on day one, which makes me think that something terrible happened to them specifically during the war. And, oh, wait, no. In this version, that makes sense. The Lacedaemonians are the first thing that happens because the production company didn't want to deal with 12 ships. The crew of Odysseus' ship is the only crew left day one, and that means his crew are automatically deeply distrustful of him, and he spends the entire story trying to gain that trust and losing that trust and gaining a little bit and losing it again. It makes me think that this Odysseus is very regretful of his actions. Particularly, I think he was very regretful of his actions during the Trojan War, and all the events leading up to the Lotus Eaters. I'm going to go over the whole Circe part bit by bit because even though this is the most accurate Odyssey put to film, this part is weird. Instead of Eurylochus and his crew finding Circe at a feast, they instead find an ancient decrepit labyrinth, and they all walk in. Circe makes a jump scare, and then everyone but Eurylochus, for an unknown reason, gets turned into a pig. And then Eurylochus does his thing and runs off. Queen Arete is like, "Why would you do this?" And Odysseus simply answers, "I was really just curious. I know that's hard to admit, but hand to gods, I just really wanted to know what was going on." Hermes gives him the moly, as always, but he tells Odysseus specifically that he's doing this to put Circe back in her place. Gross. Odysseus continues on the path and sees an illusion version of Penelope, and she's just walking forlornly in a field of fog. She disappears in the fog and he moves on. Circe is bouncing on a tree limb, tending a fire. He stokes the fire. It makes a firewall. She tells him to jump over it, and then he is once again confronted with an illusion of Penelope, this time at her loom. He reaches out to touch her. Then she's suddenly Circe, and then they're suddenly in the ancient ruins that Eurylochus was in. He drinks her brew and says it was a burning pain to resist being transformed, and when she realizes he can't be tamed, she takes him to his crew, all in a pig pen. And she asks him, "Are you sure you want to change them back into humans? Aren't they better off as pigs?" This is not a new concept. The Circe part of the Odyssey seemed to be particularly popular in the medieval era, and this whole "are humans better off than animals debate was something that was heavily brought up whenever she was involved. Anyway, the crew seem really confused when they're retransformed, and instead of embracing Odysseus, they run away from him. And this is when he and Circe have sex. The crew stay on the beach for the year, and Circe and Odysseus stay with each other. He tells the Phaeacians he was under a spell and couldn't leave without her permission, but as soon as he begs her to leave, she tells him, well, the next stop you have is the underworld, and literally just disappears. He's then in a different outfit, goes through the labyrinth that was there from the very beginning, and lo and behold, at the end of it is the underworld. Now, Circe is no longer a woman who changes men into pigs but instead she seems to be a strategic guardian of the underworld and uses her powers to make sure people don't go further into this specific labyrinth. This is further reiterated when Odysseus finally reunites with his crew and he tells them he's been to the underworld, and they have no idea what he's talking about. They think he's going insane, and he goes, well, surely you can ask Circe what's going on. And they go, what? Who's Circe? And he goes, do you not remember turning into pigs? And they go, what the fuck are you talking about? Turns out Circe removed all memory that she existed from his crew. Not him, from his crew. Consequently, they think he's going insane and refuse to listen to him about the prophecy of the cows. They still put beeswax in their ears, though, because it's probably a non-issue at that point. Skip over Scylla and Charybdis entirely, either because seeing IRL monsters might have swayed them back to him, or they wouldn't have listened to him to begin with because he's going crazy. So they wouldn't have known to pull away from Charybdis anyways. So I think they just skip over that entirely. Then we go to the sun god, then we go to Helios' island, and the rest is history. Full disclosure, this was one of the first pieces of media I consumed for this project. I hadn't even finished rereading the Odyssey because this was so easy to find. And that was a mistake. It was a mistake. I knew there were some changes. Obviously they're missing Scylla and Charybdis, but one specific change was so wild, it gaslit me into thinking it must be in the Odyssey itself. And it's not. It is not. Odysseus finally gets to his palace. All of the enslaved women are milling about and doing the domestic background labor, but all of a sudden, these women line up, stare directly into the camera, and start prophesying in a group monotone. No one else does this. No one else addresses this. Not even the narrator. This came from so out of left field that I walked away from this miniseries going, that must happen in the Odyssey. There's no way a director would make such a wild choice in the last and only last episode of this miniseries that they produced. After Odysseus is done, Alcinous is convinced that Odysseus' survival is the will of the gods, and thusly he facilitates his journey home. We as the audience never get to see if the prophecy is fulfilled, but we know, because we read the Odyssey, that it does. I didn't vote for it. So this Odysseus, he's status quo Odysseus. Why does he leave Calypso's island? Because the gods told him to. Why do they go off on all these random adventures? Because his crew decided for him. Why did they get punished? Because his crew didn't listen to him. He's just along for the ride. He's a little clever and much less of a liar. Even when he's implied to be lying in the Odyssey, here I think we're supposed to take his account to the Phaeacians at face value. And when he's explicitly lying, he's so bad at it. Eumaeus instantly clocks that he is Odysseus. He's just playing along to be a good sport of it all. Penelope instantly clocks that this is Odysseus, and it's like, why are you grubby? Why did you come to my house looking like this? How dare you? To go a little further into this, it seems that the will of the people, his crew, and the will of the gods here is given the same weight. This production was an international production between Yugoslavia, France, and Italy. So without doing too much research into this, I can easily understand why having a hero who is both at the will of the people and at the will of a higher power, in which case we could replace the gods with maybe a government or a state, and have him submit to those wills and go with the actions of those wills, keeping peace through cooperation and through adherence to authority. I can imagine that it would be comforting to a people that are still recovering from World War II in a very visceral sense, in a way that we in America could not relate to, and still going through the Cold War, the fear of the other. So having a protagonist that only moves forward through the will of the people, his crew, and the people of Phaeacia, and through the will of a higher authority, in this case the gods, I can imagine that would be very comforting. Why does he want to return to his house? Because the gods told him to. Because his return is preordained. So he's just going along with it. It doesn't matter how he feels. It's not very hard to tell that he does want to return home, but he's just along for the ride, it seems. Heavy Metal's Ulysses. This is all you get of the cover. YouTube won't let me show you the rest of this cover. Look it up yourself. Written by Jacques Loeb and illustrated by Victor Pichard. And obviously it says by Homer here. Our first Odysseus in space. Huh? He's not in space? Weird. Okay. Heavy Metal Comics is an alt sci-fi publication that started in France and branched out into America in 1974, and they became their own thing in the 80s. They made the name for themselves by being outside of the Comic Code Authority, the Hays Code, by publishing dark fantasy, sci-fi, and erotic materials, and all of that is bundled up into this version. It's really short, it's unfinished because they stop at a version of the Scylla and Charybdis bit, but what's here is pretty interesting, and we're going to talk about it. As alluded to before, Odysseus is just wrapping up the Bronze Age Trojan War, and then we pan off to the side and we see a very techno-futuristic Mount Olympus all gathering to see the ending. All the gods up there are bemoaning the fact that now that the Trojan War is over, they don't get to have any more entertainment. And Athena, thrusting boobily down the stairs, goes, "Please, Daddy Zeus, please don't hurt Odysseus anymore, let him just go home." And Zeus goes, "Odysseus, you say," and sends a storm to knock him into the quote-unquote forbidden lands. So in these forbidden lands, there are a bunch of guardians who have been told explicitly by the gods to not let humans here. And now there's a human let by the gods into these forbidden lands. One of these guardians is the Cyclops, who shoots lasers out of its eyes instead of eating people. Poseidon is ordered to reset the Cyclops so that it doesn't end their entertainment early. And when Odysseus breaks the Cyclops anyways, he gets super pissy about it and goes, "Hey, they need to be punished." And Zeus goes, "Well, their punishment is that they need to stay here longer to provide us entertainment. And if they survive, they can go home." And the rest of it is pretty episodic, despite how there's only like 2 more episodes of this. We get Aeolus and we get Circe. In Aeolus's place, the gods help just enough so that they don't die, but are still very entertained by rocket ship Odysseus. Odysseus is barely a character here. He is a plot-moving device, and I feel like that reflects how the gods are viewing the humans in general in this. The gods are both the protagonists and the amoral, oh, we just care about entertainment. We don't care about how cruel or uninterested the players are in this situation. We just want to see them go through hell, because that's funny to us. The biggest section is Circe. The first few minutes are relatively the same, but when Hermes comes to deliver the antidotes, he flies down on his jetpack and gives Odysseus the antidotes to Circe's magic, which seems to just be drugs in this one because the crew aren't physically turned into pigs. They're more just acting like pigs. And once everything settles down, once they're now welcomed guests in her house, Odysseus wanders off to find her hooked up to this psychedelic VR sex machine thing. Circe hooks him up to the weird sex machine, and I don't know if I can show this again. I don't know if I can show this, but it starts off with a beautiful bust of Penelope getting shattered and dropping into a vast ocean, and then a weird, trippy, psychedelic sex scene comes into play, and it's honestly really cool. But when Odysseus surfaces, he's like, oh God, what's happened? And Circe's like, hey, you've been in my sex machine for like a year, and now you're addicted to its drugs. So despite this, Odysseus leaves to find his crew anyways, and they're sailing on, but he's going through withdrawals. So that's why they tie this Odysseus to the mast when he sees these sirens, Scylla and Charybdis, just sitting on a rock going, hey, help, we're trapped here, please help us, oh my gosh, oh no. And when they pass by, the crew are like, we didn't see sexy mermaid ladies, we saw two frog-looking hags. And Odysseus goes, oh man, am I still tripping balls? The end. There's not a lot to say about this specific Odysseus. Like I said, he is mostly a little pawn in their Catan game of entertainment. He's got a little bit of personality in the fact that he's like a narc. He tells Circe that like when he sees that she's hooked up to this sex drug machine, he's like, hey, sex in real life is way better. And she's like, nah, but even when he's out of it, he still is like going through withdrawals and it's causing problems. So I imagine if this series were to have continued, that would have been a contributing factor to a lot of the other problems they faced. That might just be me being optimistic. Comic itself is pretty, is very gorgeous. I don't know if I can flip to any of these without being demonetized. So if you can find, I guess this one don't got titties. It's very pretty, and it's a big influence on a different subject we're going to be covering later on. I can see this kind of looks like a sunburn, but I'm trying to do the robot, I promise. Now we're in Odysseus in Space. Ulysses 31, created by Jean Cholopin and Nina Wallmark. This one was aired from 1981 to 1982, but didn't have an American release until 1986. It's mostly episodic, so I'm only going to describe the first and the last episodes with one exception. So we open on Troy, the space station, where Odie is talking to King Priam that he needs to leave for Earth and get there before the next comet hits the sky, because that's when his wife Penelope will have to choose a new husband. This is never elaborated on. Anyways, we cut over to a surprise party for Telemachus? Yeah, he's here. He gets a robot for his gifts. It's never explicitly stated what he's doing on the space station or how long he's been there, but the wiki says he was achieving solar peace. So if not an outright war, some hostile negotiations, in which case Odysseus brought his child to a war zone without his mother for an undetermined amount of time. If we assume 10 years, he brought a newborn to a war zone. Let that sink in. So Telemachus gets his comic relief robot and they are off to Earth. And they immediately run into a planet that has a boy-snatching light and abducts Telemachus off of the spaceship. Telemachus is brought to a cell where two other alien children reside, only one of which is going to become important later. All three children are supposed to be sacrificed to the Cyclops. But the Cyclops in this version is a planet-sized machine created by Poseidon that sucks the life force out of children and gives the youthful energy to its followers. Oh, and the little girl Yumi has psychic powers. Don't worry about it. Odysseus, with the help of the rest of his crew, destroys the Cyclops and gets the children off the planet, but they remained unconscious at least for a little while. After the entire planet is destroyed, space gets a little wobbly, then
like an ancient Greek god
shows up, sucks the Odyssey. Did I mention it's called the Odyssey? Through a wormhole? A pocket dimension? It's unclear. Wormhole that leads to a pocket dimension. It's a black hole, definitely. But I don't know if it's to a different level of space or if it just flings them off course so much that they got entirely lost. They get cursed by the gods, and everyone except Odysseus, Telemachus, and Yumi get put to sleep, start to float in the air, and conveniently store themselves in the cargo hold. A superimposed Zeus in space tells them they must find the kingdom of Hades if they ever hope to return to Earth and wake up all their companions again. And after that, it's mostly disjointed formulaic adventures. It's very episodic, meaning that each episode has a self-contained story and doesn't carry over into the next one. You could watch any of these episodes in any order and you'd be perfectly fine jumping in at any given point. It's understandable. The Odyssey itself feels very episodic sometimes, with each island containing its own separate story. Here's the formula. Some ancient Greek mythology figure is brought onto screen. The gods talk to them and either offer them a reward or a relief from punishment should they successfully stop Odysseus from continuing his journey. They meet Odysseus, see how awesome he is, and usually just tell him about traps outright. He solves the traps, tries to get the person that is being punished free, fails, and then they move on to the next planet. Rinse, repeat. The boss wants an Odyssey show. Oh, fantastic. This is a long book. I'm sure there's so much material to work with. What the fuck? There's like 5 cool things in here. We can't make 26 episodes out of this. Chuck all the Greek mythology stuff in there. They won't know. So yeah, we've got Sisyphus, we've got the Sphinx, we've got the Minotaur, we've got Kronos, anything they can chuck in here really. The most interesting one is the reference to the women of Lemnos, which is a Greek myth where the island women of Lemnos killed all the men of their island. That's not what happens here, but that is interesting. So with all of the infusion of ancient Greek elements and the fact that everyone's name is exactly the same, you would think that this is just the ancient Odyssey moved up to the 31st century. Oh my God, who is that? So episode 23 goes as follows. The gang falls down a hole. And in that hole is the Temple of Time. Even though we've already done a Kronos episode, they're told by the disembodied voice of Poseidon to go to their ancestors and help them achieve their goals, and then are sent back 5,000 years to Bronze Age Ithaca. Telemachus is spotted by the suitors and is captured because they think he's Telemachus, which he is. He even tries to tell them that his 31st century swag should tell them he's not the right guy, but they just lock him in a chicken crate, and then they tell ancient Penelope, who is the only person in ancient times that doesn't look identical to the future people, that she has to pick one of them to marry or they're going to kill Telemachus. Telemachus is rescued by Telemachus, who is in fact a 10-year-old boy here, so the suitors get a pass for mistaking them. They run off, get cornered, but both ancient and future Odysseus help them escape. Ancient Odysseus gets his arm injured, and they go off to hide in the cave. Yumi tells them about the bow contest, and they bemoan that they can't do anything about it because ancient Odysseus' arm is injured. And then they look slightly to the left and see a perfectly identical Odysseus, sans injury. And then they laugh. They laugh at themselves, because of course you should. So future Odysseus crashes the contest. He even tells them outright he's future Odysseus, scares the shit out of the suitors with his jetpacks, shoes, and laser sword, and they all run away. Everyone's happy, no one has to die, the future people fade into the future, and then they never speak of this again. So now the final episode. Now this show may not have been specifically for kids, but it is the most, here is the moral of the story endings I've ever seen for an Odyssey. So it was probably meant for kids. So the final episode, they do make it to the Kingdom of Hades, and after some Orpheus and Eurydice bullshit, the entire crew gets their way onto like the final escalator past the river Styx, and Odysseus is chasing them, and once he reaches a platform, Odysseus hears the disembodied voice of Hades go, "Now that they've passed the river Styx, your crew belong to me, but as long as they belong to me, you can return to Earth." And Odysseus turns and looks into the middle distance, a crystal tear forming in his eye, and he goes, "No, take me and leave my crew. Any homecoming I had would mean nothing if the price was abandoning my crew." And then...
This man has overcome all obstacles, passed every test, survived all our trials. This was his last chance.
Please.
Ulysses, you didn't hesitate to enter into my city. The promise of Zeus will be honored. Take your companions and return home.
So yeah, I don't know how to make that more clear-cut than it already is. Odysseus performs the moral act and gets his reward. Simple, clean cut. The writers wanted this Odysseus to be a moral, upstanding captain and only do what a moral, upstanding captain would do. Odysseus is only clever enough to get himself out of the situations his kindness puts him in, but not clever enough to avoid the traps entirely. He is definitely clever. He's got a few feats of cleverness, but they are definitely second to his nobility. His kindness, his ability to go into danger to save people, his ability to forgive people who have caused him harm due to the gods, his ability to go and look at a situation and try to find the most peaceful solution. This is what defines Odysseus. He is kind, but he is also a strategist. So if Odysseus is supposed to be unequivocally good, that means the gods he fights against and the gods that commit all the atrocities that he sees for all the people on the different planets he visits are the evil that he needs to overcome. Despite this, he makes no attempts to destroy the gods, even when he meets a character that has that express purpose, Circe. He tries to help her because he thinks she has some information he wants, but he never tries to destroy the gods, even though that would make things very much easier for him. And the ancient Greek pantheon does commit atrocities against Odysseus for the majority of the adaptations. But it just seems weird in this context because Odysseus is not an active worshiper of this ancient Greek pantheon. So it seems odd that the idea to destroy them or outright confront them never seems to cross his mind. To me, this Odysseus is the most stoic TM Odysseus. He has no hope of defeating the gods in any way that would change his situation other than completing these trials. So he suffers through each trial as ethically as he can, and when he reaches the end, he is presented with one final moral test, succeeds, and then is rewarded. Now, I'm not a Stoic philosopher, and I don't know a whole lot about it, but I know that the Stoics, when they were being conceived, loved Odysseus. He was their guy. They loved that he just went through all of it, all of that suffering, and was rewarded at the end. That's all I know about Stoicism. Other than that, I'd say that this first episode, at least, is worth a watch. There's some cool designs in here, like the Trojan space station is shaped like a helmet, which, why not? The Odyssey itself is shaped like a giant eye, probably in irony to the whole Cyclops thing. This is the only version where Telemachus is on the journey, and I wish I could say that led to some cool father-son bonding moments, but honestly, Telemachus is only here to do rad 80s kids things. All in all, there was fascinating potential for this, but due to its medium of being an episodic anime and not allowing for any growth over the episodes, there was only so much they could do. So, unfortunately, the aesthetics are all I can look after, and they're really cool. I'd say space is nice. Nostos: The Return, directed by Franco Pavolli in 1989. This is the last thing I'm filming before the conclusion, before I go see the Odyssey. I originally wasn't going to do a segment on this one because I couldn't find even a subtitled version of this one. But upon doing further research, there is no translations for this because the language that people are speaking is unintelligible on purpose. So here we go. So this isn't a plot movie. This is more of a things happen on screen and you feel things movie. The actual events are Odysseus and his crew are on a ship, and then there's flashbacks happening, and then they go to a cave, and there's a bunch of naked people in the cave that are very lethargic. Odysseus and them stay for a while, but then they have to go, and then a shipwreck happens, and then he washes up on Calypso's shore alone. He stays there for a while, but then realizes he has to go home, and he gets to Ithaca. The end. Now, saying that's all that this movie is would be an entire disservice to what's going on. This is like some high art concept shit. And I think I get what the movie is putting down. I think it is. I do. I'm going to give you like a little blurb of what I think this Odysseus is. I think what is happening is that this Odysseus is trying to forget all the bad memories of his past. He is remembering all the things that happened in Troy and all the things that happened on Ithaca, and he's trying to get back to a point where he only remembers the good things, like his home and his wife. But going through like the Cave of the Lotus Eaters, which I think is what's happening here, they try to offer him oblivion, which he doesn't accept. So he tries to get his crew out of there. But after his crew dies in the shipwreck, he falls into more despair. And when he's with Calypso, he is wanting to forget it all. But he realizes that trying to forget all the bad memories means that he will also lose all of the good memories that he's been clinging on to. So once he realizes that he has to face his past, and he goes home. There's no joyous moment of reconciliation with either Homeland or Penelope. There's just this quiet acceptance of, all right, I'm here now. I'm going to do the work. And the last shot is of Penelope folding a dress and tucking it into a chest, which I think is supposed to symbolize the way that Odysseus is going to have to deal with the negative memories of his past. Those memories, like that dress, are still going to exist, but they have to exist respected and cared for and tucked away. But they still have to exist. Or I could just be pulling everything out of my ass. So this one views homecoming as a self-actualization of fully embracing everything that has led up to this moment. This Odysseus is not charming, he's not witty, he's not a smooth talker, nobody is in this one. He's a quiet contemplation and a wanting of an escape, but gaining the wisdom that escape is not going to change all the bad things that happen to you. It's just going to make you lose who you are. So this Odysseus is the self-actualized Odysseus, fully understanding who he is and what he needs to do to get closure for the things that have happened in his past. All right. The Odyssey, a play by Derek Walcott, staged firstly in 1992. We have once again entered into a realm that is too smart for me. I could blame the fact that I am reading the stage play instead of actually watching it, and reading a stage play is like watching a movie with a blindfold on, but no, I do think this is just too smart for me. The lyrics, I would have loved to hear this music. I don't know if it exists on the internet, but I wasn't able to find it in the brief time that I knew about this play's existence. This is another one of those ones that I found pretty late. So we're going to do our best. We have a significant addition in a kind of narrator / musician, Billy Blind Blues, who sings and leads the Greek chorus in transitions and poignant songs. And I really, really wish I could hear this music. According to the internet, the music is very Caribbean soul-based, which makes sense. Walcott is from Haiti, but this play is, as far as I'm aware, only staged in England. Now, at the very beginning of the play, Odysseus is explicit about what he wants. He wants to go home. He feels it in his bones, the longing for homecoming, and kind of disparages other people who don't feel it. Like, he hasn't questioned if there's any other way to live. He's just longing for home. After this first scene of him being introduced, we are on to the Telemachy, where he goes to visit Nestor and Helen, and Menelaus, of course. And then he starts getting visions and dreams of what Odysseus went through during his time. The first thing Telemachus sees is Elpenor and Odysseus talking, and the windbag incident happens, and all that crew get killed by being thrown overboard. But the next scene is Odysseus waking up on the Phaeacian shore and meeting Nausicaa. But the shipwreck that just happened is not what gets him to the Phaeacians. He tells the Phaeacians in this vision that Telemachus is having what other stuff happened to him while he was traveling. So it's kind of all happening atemporally. Several of the locations are reimagined. Circe's island is now a brothel. The Cyclops now rules over a city that he traps in a cave and terrifies people so bad that they're afraid to think, and they live in this barely metaphorical panopticon. Longing for home is what causes a lot of the problems as he's going through. He gets distracted by filling that need, that longing in the short term, by seeking treasure, by getting distracted by brothels, by proving that he's a smart man. It seems to be the juxtaposition is fulfilling short-term gratification over the long-term need of returning home. I've been informed that this play has masterfully set doubling, which is a technique in stage plays where one actor plays multiple characters, often through different acts. Like, for example, in Hamilton, when John Lawrence is played by the same actor that plays Hamilton's son Philip, to emphasize their connection through their tragedy of like committing duels, which is very good. When I found out about that, because I didn't watch the play at first, I listened to the soundtrack. When I found out about that, I lost my goddamn mind. I'm like, that's so good. That's so tragic. He sees the face of his best friend dying from a duel like when they were kids. So Melantho is played by the same actress as Nausicaa. The Cyclops is played by the same actor as Eumaeus, and Ajax is played by the same actor as Antinous. What I think I can glean from this play, even though I'm only operating with like 25% of the information that is required to actually deal with this play, is that it's trying to question the idea of nostos, of homecoming, in reflecting the real world with the same actors and with the same kind of plots that Odysseus has to overcome in his homeland. I think it's drawing into question if the idea of homeland is such a prize to value over the rest of the world. Is returning to your homeland worth all of this strife and effort when your homeland is basically no different from the outside world? And if it's not, why did you sacrifice everything to get back? And unlike other adaptations where Penelope becomes the reason, where Telemachus becomes the reason, I think we're kind of left on a we're still going to figure that out type note at the end of this play. So this Odysseus, what is this Odysseus? Is this Odysseus anything? Can I say that this Odysseus is something when I only have a fraction of what this play actually is? So I think this is Odysseus the hopeful, maybe? Hoping that once you reach home, everything will be fine. And finding out you haven't escaped anything. You've just narrowed your scope. The Odyssey, the miniseries, directed by Andrei Konchalovsky, with Armand Assante as our Odysseus in 1997. I'm not joking when I say that this, going forward, is the most influential Odyssey we are going to see. Oh, and Christopher Lee's here. Anyways, we start off with our linear timeline again, and we get about 15 minutes of backstory before the Odyssey starts, which begins with the on-screen birth of Telemachus, which he assists with flawlessly. OMG swoon. So we get a little bit of the Trojan War, and then we'll move on to the horse bit, but in this battle that they're showing, there's a random child just standing in the middle of it looking deeply upset, and Odysseus just stops fighting, picks up the child, and does something with him. Presumably just sets him off a couple feet away because he's immediately back to fighting to show that he's just so good at, like, everything. But, 2 scenes later and this child's entire city is destroyed. So he's good at that too. Anyways, after that, Odysseus just goes down to the shore and starts boasting about how he's great at everything, which so far the movie agrees with.
I do not need you now. I can do anything.
This upsets Poseidon specifically, who appears as a flat face in the waves a la Mummy style, and says that Odysseus should be giving credit to the gods where it's due, and until he does that, he's never going to get home. This seems to be Odysseus' one fatal flaw. Hubris is an ancient Greek thing, I get that, and it is one of those things that gives him a flaw that isn't really a flaw to the audience's perspectives. Oh no, this guy is disrespectful to the Greek pantheon, something we don't believe in and don't really respect ourselves. Oh no. But it's the only way we see him maybe change, ? I would put into question how much of this actually gets put into effect. They sail on anyways and start having the typical beats. The Cyclops is very reminiscent of the 1954 version with the wine focus and a little bit of xenophobia. We have an ancient Egyptian Circe. I'm going to do a quick aside for this Circe because I haven't had a chance to talk about this yet. But here we have Circe turning all the men not just into pigs, but in a variety of different animals, which is a very good nod to an original, like, sort of secret that's in the Odyssey. In the original Odyssey, while Odysseus' men are going off to visit Circe for the first time, he hunts a stag, and he notes specifically that it was way too easy to kill. And this is, by some scholars' accounts, implying that every animal on Circe's island is a transformed human, which makes the horror way worse. So having Circe being able to transform these men into multiple different animals kind of lends to that fact, especially because all these animals are super chill around people. This adaptation, more so than the other film adaptations, is very dismissive of the gods, even though Odysseus' hubris is the only character arc he has to go through. Hermes is distrusted when he gives Odysseus the moly. Circe is threatened multiple times, as opposed to the prerequisite one. Aeolus is a brief comic relief character, and even Athena's presence is diminished greatly. It seems that the idea is the gods help those who help themselves is a general theme here, and the only active participation she takes in the plot is when she disguises Odysseus as the beggar. Again, like the 1954 version, Polyphemus is not the instigator of Poseidon's curse. Poseidon's curse is instigated at Troy. And this is the most tame version for the initiation of the curse. Something that the audiences are not going to blame Odysseus for. They are going to immediately hate Poseidon. So it takes a lot of the teeth out of Odysseus, more so than any other adaptation I've seen. This is a unproblematic fave type Odysseus. And what's his motivation? He wants to get back to his loving wife and son, and there is nothing that is going to stop him from doing that, except for all the sex he has with all the women on the side. I can't speak from everyone's perspective, but I feel like this Odysseus was geared towards women. What with the being good at childbirth, protecting that kid, being a little rugged because he's still good at fighting, and complimenting Penelope every chance he gets, even when he's with all the hot goddesses. Menelaus fully believes that this Odysseus is dead because any chance he got during the Trojan War, Odysseus would just talk about how he was getting home to his wife. And to Menelaus, there is nothing that would have kept Odysseus away for so long except for death. So to me, this is the pinnacle of romantic Odysseus. He is getting home to his wife and nothing can stop him. The sirens would not be a temptation to this man. He is getting home, so they are cut out entirely. The only reason these women are getting any attention from him is that they won't let him leave. After he kills the suitors, he specifically calls out that he wants this place clean so that Penelope is not inconvenienced and sees all the blood and gore and stuff. He is in love with this woman. And to be fair, the cinematography tries to give them more time together in these like very brief flashbacks that he has of them just like horsing around and stuff. So they're trying to expand, the intimacy a little bit.
I would rather lie in my wife's arms for one moment as a man than to live forever without her.
So if this is the most romantic Odysseus TM, why is he having all these affairs? Because to a modern audience, that would mean that he doesn't really love his wife. And I would argue that he's trying to love his wife, but the film seems to think that love is something that happens with two people in an exact moment. All of the flashbacks that he has with Penelope are them being lovey-dovey together and being like kind of cute. But it's them doing like intimate things in the moment. He doesn't have any memories of her like saying something really cool or doing something really cool or him admiring her. It's just them kind of tomfooling around a little bit. So I think the film thinks that love is something that happens moment to moment, and when those moments cease to happen, then other moments are allowed to happen. So when Odysseus is with Circe, he's having a different but equal relationship that has nothing to do with Penelope. And same with Circe. He falls for these women very quick, despite them trying to go, oh, it's goddess magic and all that. The goddess magic only influenced the time, not how he felt about things, in theory. Again, we don't have a clever Odysseus. The only two kind of clever things he does are the nobody bit, which is good to keep in mind. And when he's a beggar, he pretends to be crazy so that he's able to give Telemachus advice when he is getting the shit beat out of him by Antinous. Side note, this film is the closest we see to a slaughtering of the enslaved women. Melantho is killed by an arrow that goes through Eurymachus and into her, which I feel was not earned. I mean, there's never a good reason to kill the enslaved women, ever, even in the original, but the only thing that this Melantho did was, like, tell Eurymachus that there was, shenanigans going on with the shroud. But I don't think that earned her to die under this motherfucker. Now, I might have said this at the top, but I'm restating it because it's very important. This miniseries is the most influential film that we're going to cover. Every other film adaptation of the Odyssey has something directly from this miniseries. Even ones we're not covering. Even the animated series that I put in the 4 kids section has one thing from this miniseries. Every single film adaptation has either a scene setup that's the same, a direct quote, a structural change that comes from this miniseries. Every single one. Welcome to the end of part 2. I imagine it's been 3-ish hours. So, thanks for sticking around. Here are the credits.